everything's driven by a Splunk search. And so if you look at how these things are formatted, that one's probably not a perfect example. We can grab this one here. We can edit this search, and you can see here that there's a Splunk search. It's kind of all word wrapped there, but this is obviously something you could just put into a Splunk search, regular old Splunk search. You can see we're using the data model command. I'll show that in a second, a little bit more about what we're doing there. But the key thing is that we're looking for this DEST in this example to be equal to $input_asset, dollar. So the dollars at the beginning and end of that string refer back to the value up in that text input. And then we're also down here for the time range scope. This one's actually broken, so I'll fix it right now. But what I really want the time range for this search to be is to refer back to the shared time picker, which is that other element that I just showed you up there. Actually, I'm not going to save that because it might possibly be there for a reason that I'm not aware of, but that's how you would change that. So we built this dashboard, but the way that I sort of started building these searches, there's really two ways we can do it, right? And so what I'll show you first is using pivot, and that's really that sort of easy button that Dimitri was talking about. We want a machine data platform that everybody can use, not just folks that are good with our search language. So we'll jump in there real quickly. He's over here to pivot. Now, the data models that we'll see here in a minute come from our common information model. You guys heard of the common information models? Common information model. So the idea behind the common information model is that it is the collection from a security perspective of data models that we use at Splunk to describe security data. So you can see here that there's a whole bunch of models. So there's an authentication model, for example. It's just going to contain all kinds of information about logins to your Linux systems or your Active Directory, or really anything that is where someone logs in. We're going to capture that in the authentication model. We have a certificate model that's going to capture all kinds of information about SSL and TLS certificates that are in use in your environment. We have a home for information about your databases, right? We have a place to store information about email that's being sent in your environment, so on and so forth. You can see there's intrusion detection, vulnerability. There's an inventory model, which is kind of cool, that maps to our identity and asset subsystem. So this is sort of the palette, or this is the sort of selection that we have, the menu that we can select from. So for example, if I wanted to build a dashboard a dashboard panel to add to our super context app, I can look at, for example, this malware object, and you can see that inside the model, it's actually a model, not an object. Inside this model are these objects, right? So I can just look at, for example, the malware attacks object. And so now I get dropped into this pivot interface, right? And I can just say, okay, well, I know that there's been 207,584 malware attacks, but that's not terribly useful as an aggregate number, right? So this is the kind of the power of pivot, right? So I can say, no, I'd really like to know that split out by category. So I can say, okay, split the rows, right? Right now we have one row. I want to split that into a row for every category of malware attack. So I can just do that really quickly, and it's going to, run that search in the background for us. It might take just a bit because I'm not sure. So I'm running it over all time, which is a big no-no. So I should have limited that. But in any case, now you can see that this pivot interface has very quickly allowed me to break that up into multiple lines. And now we also had this concept within our super context app that we wanted to have this constrained just to one IP address or one asset. So I can actually add a filter up here and say, okay, I want to add a filter on the destination, and I want, in this case, I'm going to put an IP address in here for right now. So 10.11.36.20. And then we'll replace that with that token in a second. So this will populate here in a second, and now As soon as I have something useful here, then I want to save this as a dashboard panel. So I'm going to go put this into my SuperConnect dashboard, and I might give it a panel like malware on this system or something. Although it could be more than that, which is kind of cool. The cool thing about data models, right? So the malware data model is going to have malware that was discovered on this system, maybe by a traditional endpoint, antivirus system. But this could also have information from a FireEye, sandbox, or some sort of network security device that has detected a virus, flying across the network, or detected a virus by detonating it or something like that. So it's not just kind of the traditional view of malware, for example. So in any case, I'm just going to say malware on this system and save it, and then we can go look at my dashboard. Now, in this case, we don't have anything in this input, so I'll just put this in there. But if we go down to the bottom here, we can see this malware on this system panel. Now, it populated very quickly because it already knew that it was going to 10.11.36.20 because that was hard-coded into that search, as you recall. So we can just kind of wire it up real quickly to kind of conform to the way we've done the rest of these panels. So I'm going to say edit panels real quickly, and we'll go down to our new panel down here. And now, this actually came from a pivot, so it's a slightly different little icon here. So it says inline pivot, but that's okay. We can still just edit the Splunk search string. And even though this was built by an automata, so sorry, inside joke. So this was built automatically by the system, but it's still very readable. And you can see here's that 10.11.36.20 that we kind of hard coded in there. So we can now just say, okay, actually refer back to that. Remember what it's called. So we'll say input asset, $input asset $. And now it's going to conform and show me information about that particular asset. And then let's use the same shared time picker field that we're using for all the other panels. We'll save it. We'll say done. And now we've just used pivot to add another panel to our super context app. And it's just that easy. Now, we could also approach this not so much from the pivot feature perspective, but also from a search perspective. So if we know the search language, right? If we're a search ninja or a search pirate or whatever you want to be, whatever you want to call yourself, if you're familiar with Splunk Search, we can do the same thing that we just did, but I think probably in a more efficient way if you're a search person rather than a GUI person, right? So let me pop over to the search here. So this is just the Splunk search that most of you are probably familiar with, right? Now we're talking about data models. So when you might normally start a search, right, by saying like index equals this or that, or source type equals this, or something like that. In this case, we're going to use the data model, right? And again, the benefit there is now we're going to get the data across all of our systems, right, that pertain to a particular type of security data. So if I say use the data model command, don't be afraid of the data model. We're in IT, so we're intimidated by them. So we have data model, and so if I just type that command alone, I'll just kind of show you what Splunk does. Splunk says, hey, I have a whole bunch of data models, and it shows up here as JSON. It's actually formatted pretty nicely if you're into this sort of thing, and you can click a little plus, here and expand out that node of the little JSON object, and you can see not only what is the name of the model, but also what are the objects in there. And if we actually come down here, here's our malware object that we looked at. We looked at it in the GUI earlier, but you can see here that we have the same objects that were available. Here's the malware attacks, which is the one that we drilled down on inside of our pivot, right? So this is just a good way to kind of explore the data models. It's kind of cool. I like this. If I can't remember the name of an object that's within a data model, I use this all the time. If you wanted to get like a full view of all the data models, we also obviously have it documented on docs.splunk.com. And this is going to show you all these data models, all their objects that make them up. And so that's another good resource. And I know we're pretty close, but we'll wrap it up here in the next couple minutes. So one thing I can do here is I can say data model, and I know that data model is called malware, because I just looked at it, right? Data model, malware, and there's an object in there called malware tags. And there's a little special word you put on the end of this to say, don't show me the structure of the data model, don't show me all that JSON, but actually show me the events that map to this data model, which is ultimately where we want to get, right? So if I just do that, this will actually start returning events like a regular Splunk search. But again, we didn't have to worry about where the data came from. We didn't have to worry if it came from our trend micro, or our semantic, or our McAfee, or whatever, or our FireEye, or anything that can detect malware in our environment. We're going to get all of it, and that's by virtue of the data model, right? So now we have events, and now we know what to do, right, in the Splunk world. So we can do something like stats count by, and there's down here we have category, for example, but I'm actually going to show you the way that these fields get extracted when you do a search like this. It actually names the fields that were part of the data model actually show up as the name of the data model and then the field name. And you can actually, there's some commands you can do to drop that first part. But in this case, we can see we have malware attacks.category, and that was exactly what we built our other panel and pivot on. So we can do count by malware attacks.category, and then we can do something like do this. Let's pipe this to a search and say host equals 10.11.6.20, and we pipe that to stats to count up by the category. And so this is going to look a lot like that very same table that we built in Pivot. Anyway. So as this is loading, there'll be one more thing I want to show you in a second here, which is how do we do that jump from enterprise security, right? The thing that we thought would be so valuable to be able to pivot to this. I picked the wrong field, I think. Okay. So how do we pivot from enterprise security into our new app? So I'll just quickly show you that, and we'll release you. I know we're the last talk of the day, so it's, I'm sure you're all itching to go rest a little bit. Okay. Not sure why that's not loading, but let me pop over and show you kind of how we did that in enterprise security. So really, all we did here was create a Splunk workflow. And this is not actually an enterprise security feature, it's just a core Splunk feature. So you can create these types of workflows in any kind of dashboard. You don't need to limit it just to ES. And so if we go up to settings and fields, there's workflow actions here. And it's going to probably have a whole bunch of them. So enterprise security has a lot of workflow actions. We're just seeing all of them. So we just said select all the app context, and we just selected by owner. That surfaced our little super context workflow. So if we look at what that thing is doing, first of all, we're just saying, okay, we want the text in that drop-down menu to say super context of, and then we put a little token in here called $@ field value $. And so when it shows up, remember it said get super context 4, 10, 11, 36, 20. So that's how that got substituted in there. And then we said what fields inside of Splunk would we want this context-sensitive workflow to apply to. And so in our case, we just said apply it to source IP, to dest IP, and host. There's probably some other ones where it makes sense. But that's what we started with. And then we want to show it in the field menus. We can also, there's other places you can show that. In this case, we just said show it in the field menu. Make it a link to something else. And then the real key is down here in this URI. Let's see if we can make that a little bit bigger. And so we're saying we didn't have to put a host name in there because it's all part of the same Splunk deployment. So we just say /app, super context, asset context, and then we give it an earliest and a latest, which are just 0 because we're using that time picker. And then the key thing is we say form.input asset equals that same field value there, right? So that's the key thing that allows us to jump over that other dashboard. Let's see here. So should we see if there's any questions, or you want to finish?
Let's jump right real quick back over here, and we'll set you all free. Okay. All right. So that's basically, that was the big piece, was input asset. Right? If you put that in your pivot instead of the actual IP address, the way that I built them was basically just replaced the IP when I was building the pivot with this. And then once I dropped it to the dashboard panel, I popped in at the top of that super context dashboard, the IP, and whatever I was looking for, and it rendered it out. In the slides that you'll be able to download, they look very different than the one I showed you. Obviously, this is more fun to present to, but the other ones have more context that will be better for you offline. But if you want more information about context, there's the GitHub link. You can take a picture of it now if you want. But if you do, you're going to have to also take a picture of Dave, so you know. And talk about workflow actions and also data models, because they're very, very powerful. Feel free to download what we've put up on GitHub. The later version will be up in a couple of minutes, I suspect.
Yeah, we'll update it. It's under frequent updates.
And then only enjoy the slides. So this is one of my favorite quotes. I always enjoy this one. But I do want to say thank you from Dave Harold. Is there any questions I can answer for you or Dave? No. If not, well, listen, thank you very much for coming. We're coming to coming to our talk. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My name is Dimitri. This is Dave. And that's Brad. Thanks for coming.
Have a great day.